I thought we had a solid 15-year marriage until my wife asked for an open relationship because she had feelings for her boss. But what I uncovered after that broke more than just trust. My name is Mark, age 38, and until 2 weeks ago, I would have sworn that my 15-year marriage to Claire was steady. We have 2 children. Jane, 13, a budding artist who doodles on every scrap of paper she can find, and Martin, 10, whose Lego cities annex every corner of his bedroom. For the past 3 years, Claire has worked in marketing at a mid-sized company. Her direct supervisor, Andrew, is in his early 40s, married with children of his own. I used to think of him only as the guy who signed her performance reviews. About a fortnight ago, I sensed the first crack. Claire came through the door still wearing her blazer, but her mind was somewhere else. She glanced at her phone so often she nearly burned dinner, and every notification lit up a smile that did not include me. When I asked if something was wrong, she said work had been exhausting, yet her voice carried a tremor that did not match simple fatigue. Last Tuesday, once the kids were upstairs, she asked me to join her in the living room. Her hands shook while she twisted her wedding ring, and my stomach knotted because that kind of tension usually means bad health news or a death in the family. Instead, she inhaled, looked at the ceiling, and told me she felt we had drifted apart. She wanted us to consider an open marriage. I sat there numb while she explained that she had developed feelings for someone else and believed exploring other relationships might help us both. When she said someone else, my mind jumped straight to Andrew. Over the past month, she had mentioned him more often than usual. I asked if the man was her boss. Claire's eyes darted away and her cheeks turned crimson. She said the identity did not matter and that this conversation was about our fulfillment, not gossip. I told her bluntly an open marriage was not an option and that if she wanted another partner, we would have to divorce. She backpedaled, insisting she loved me and did not want to destroy our family. Then she admitted she could not dismiss her feelings and thought clear rules might keep everything safe. All I pictured was Jane and Martin discovering their mother was dating while still married to their father. I asked if anything physical had already happened. She said no, but the pause before she answered stretched long enough to crush my trust. 2 hours later, we were still talking in circles. She kept crying, claiming she never meant to cause pain, and urging me to think about how modern couples make alternative arrangements work. I could only hear the subtext. She wanted permission to cheat without repercussion. That night, I lay awake, tracing the past decade, wondering which hints I had missed. Claire rose at dawn, cheerful frying eggs, and quizzing the kids on vocabulary, as if the night's bombshell never landed. At the office, I stared through spreadsheets. A coworker asked if I was ill, and I nearly confessed everything before shame clamped my throat shut. When I returned home, Claire had prepared my favorite meal-lit candles and laughed too hard at jokes that were not funny. Jane noticed and asked why Mom seemed extra happy. Claire said she had enjoyed a productive day at work. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste metal. After the kids headed upstairs, Claire reopened the topic armed with articles about open marriages and statistics about relationship satisfaction. I told her again that I would not agree. She called me close-minded and said my refusal surprised her because I had always supported her ambitions. The way she linked a potential affair with professional growth made me realize she either believed her own spin or thought I was a fool. I announced I would spend a few nights at a hotel to clear my head. She followed me from room to room, pleading. I packed a small suitcase while she repeated that she loved me and that nothing had changed between us. In my mind, everything had changed. The children sat at their desks upstairs solving math problems while their parents' marriage unraveled below. I hugged them goodnight and claimed an unexpected business trip. Jane looked worried. I assured her things were fine. The lie scraped my throat raw. I drove 20 minutes to a modest hotel, checked in, and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling like I had stepped outside my own life. An hour later, A knock rattled the door. I did not need to look through the peephole. I knew it was Claire. Mascara streaked her cheeks. She said running away would solve nothing and begged me to listen. I let her in to avoid a hallway scene, but the moment she crossed the threshold, she started a new proposal. She said mentioning an open marriage had been a mistake, and that she was willing to stay physically faithful, only maintaining an emotional connection with Andrew. The absurdity made me laugh once. The laugh sounded bitter, even to me. I told her that emotional involvement was already betrayal. She accused me of being unfair, saying she could have hidden everything and cheated behind my back, but she had chosen honesty. She expected credit for that confession. For another hour, she tried every angle, limited contact, scheduled dates that would never overlap with family time, even suggesting I find a partner of my own. Each idea proved the same point: she had decided whom she wanted and now hunted for my blessing. I asked if she would cut all personal communication with Andrew and request a departmental transfer. She replied that such a move would harm her career. In that instant, I knew she had chosen him over us. I told her to leave. She sobbed, begging me not to throw away 15 years. I repeated that I would call her tomorrow about next steps. After she left, the room fell silent, except for the air conditioner humming like distant traffic. I opened my laptop and stared at divorce law articles until dawn. Right now, I sit beneath the dim hotel lamp, writing these words, because sleep refuses to come. Part of me still pictures family vacations and Saturday pancakes, and wants to fight for that dream. The other part sees how casually Claire tried to rewrite our vows and wonders if the dream ended long ago. I spent the first night in that chain hotel sitting against the headboard while muted news flickered on the screen. Around 3 in the morning, I drifted into a shallow sleep, only to jolt awake an hour later, heart pounding, after a dream where Claire and Andrew whispered in our kitchen while I stood outside the glass door. When daylight seeped past the curtains, I showered, dressed for work, and stared at my reflection as if an imposter had borrowed my face. During the day, I managed little more than opening emails and closing them again. I could not shake the image of Claire fidgeting with her ring eyes shining at the mention of another man. At noon, I called my older brother Daniel. He lives 2 states away, yet distance has never dulled his bluntness. I told him everything. His verdict was simple. She moved the goalposts. You did nothing to deserve that. Harsh but steadying. That evening, I ignored Claire's texts until one arrived that read, "Please come home so we can talk about boundaries." The word boundaries sounded like fresh paint covering rot. I replied that I needed space and would visit the kids the next afternoon. When Wednesday came, I parked a block from the house and practiced a smile in the rearview mirror. Jane and Martin met me at the door with excited chatter about a science fair and a Lego spaceship. Claire hovered behind them, hopeful yet wary. After homework and dinner, I tucked the kids into bed, then joined Claire in the living room. She pleaded with me to move back for routine's sake. I told her routine without trust was set dressing. She proposed counseling. I repeated my one condition: cut all personal contact with Andrew and request a transfer. She said a transfer could derail her career. I thanked her for the honesty, stood, and drove back to the hotel. A week later, the cost of nightly lodging and the ache of missing the children pushed me home, but on my terms. I carried my suitcase into the guest room and told Claire we were separated under one roof. She nodded quickly, as if any arrangement that kept me close was a win. The children sensed tension at once. Jane asked whether we were mad at each other. I said adults sometimes need space to work things out. Martin squeezed my hand and said he hoped the space would not be too big. Living as roommates felt stranger than living apart. Claire and I rotated cooking duties, signed school forms, and answered small talk from neighbors who noticed nothing unusual. Yet suspicion had settled inside me like grit in an eye. Claire's phone never left her reach. She took calls on the patio even when rain streaked the sliding glass door. One night, I walked downstairs for water and saw her laptop open to a relationship forum thread titled, "How to Handle Feelings for a Coworker." I closed the lid without reading, more equally angry at her ongoing obsession and at myself for spying. 3 weeks into our under-one-roof separation, I came home to find Claire silent at the table, face drained of color. The kids bounced upstairs. She asked me to stay. Then she whispered the words I half expected and still dreaded. I was fired. My first reaction was confusion. She explained that she had tried to talk with Andrew privately, confessed her feelings, asked if they might explore a future together. He told her he was committed to his marriage, then reported her to Human Resources for inappropriate behavior. HR concluded she had crossed multiple boundaries and terminated her that morning. While she spoke, tears slid down her cheeks, yet her sorrow seemed tangled with humiliation more than regret. She said she had lost everything in a single day, and begged me not to abandon her too. I answered that her employment status did not change the damage already done to our marriage. She reached for my hand. I kept both on the back of a chair. The message landed harder than any shout. Unemployment altered the household overnight. Claire drifted through the rooms in pajamas, refreshing email for job leads, and I suspected for messages from Andrew that never came. I picked up extra projects at work to cover bills and managed lunches, carpools, and missing library book hunts. Claire thanked me for keeping the routine, yet resentment flashed whenever I went out without checking on her first. One Thursday, after a full day of applications, she cornered me in the driveway. She said a supportive partner would comfort her, hold her, remind her she was valuable. I replied that support is built on trust, not pity. She called me selfish, said my refusal to forgive proved I had driven her to seek connection elsewhere. I walked away before anger pushed me into words I could not retract. Meanwhile, the children started carrying invisible weights. Jane, sharp enough to sense moods, confronted me in the kitchen. She said Mom told her office politics cost the job and that I was being cold during a hard time. I knelt and told her adult problems are complicated. No matter how things looked, both parents loved her. She said everyone deserves a second chance. Her innocence felt like a knife in my ribs. Martin reacted differently. He refused piano practice, built Lego walls around his bed, and asked if parents who fight always divorce. I told him some parents stay together, others do not, but children are never the reason. He nodded, unconvinced. Winter pressed on. Claire proposed marriage counseling again, promising full transparency. I asked if that included blocking Andrew everywhere and showing me her phone. She said privacy still mattered. I said so did honesty. She cried. I did not. At the start of February, my brother and I left for a 2-day ski trip planned months earlier. Claire told me a caring husband would stay. I answered that our status as husband and wife was in question by her choice, not a weekend getaway. When I returned, she unleashed a torrent of anger, accusing me of abandoning her. I reminded her she had nearly abandoned our marriage for someone else. The children hovered on the stairs listening. I forced myself to leave the room rather than escalate. As the weeks crawled, Claire's mood swung between forced optimism and silent despair. She printed resumes, baked banana bread for the kids, sent late-night emails I pretended not to notice. My own nights were spent gathering bank statements and creating a timeline for a lawyer, though I still had not scheduled the appointment. I hoped clarity would arrive like sunrise. Instead, it came as a notification on Claire's laptop in mid-March, glinting on the screen while she showered. A messaging app I did not recognize flashed Andrew's initial and the words, "Stop contacting me." My heart dropped. I opened the chat and saw weeks of pleas from Claire and curt refusals from him. I photographed everything, then closed the lid, hands trembling. That discovery and what followed belong to the next installment. Part 3 will explain how those messages ended any lingering doubt that my marriage could be saved, and why I finally took the first formal step toward divorce. The The messages I saw on Claire's laptop ended all uncertainty. Each screen capture showed the same pattern: Claire apologizing, explaining that her feelings were real, asking Andrew to meet, and Andrew replying that she must stop. The thread stretched back to the day after she lost her job. I photographed every exchange and shut the lid with shaking hands. That night, I waited until the kids were asleep. Claire was in the den scrolling job boards. I placed my phone on the coffee table and opened the album of screenshots. She glanced down, froze, then raised her eyes to mine. There was no anger left in me, only a cold vacancy. "You said you cut contact," I said. My voice sounded distant. She stammered, said she had only wanted closure. I reminded her that closure never involves weeks of pleading. Tears slid down her cheeks as she claimed she still loved me, that she was trapped by feelings she could not turn off. I listened without comment until her words ran out. "I am filing for divorce," I said at last. "The decision is final." She lurched forward, grabbing my forearm, begging me to reconsider counseling. She promised to delete every account block, every number, prove her commitment. I pulled my arm free. Trust is not a switch. It cannot be toggled by desperation. Claire's breath hitched. She asked how we would tell Jane and Martin. I said we would tell them together, honestly, but without adult details. She wept harder, saying she had destroyed the best thing in her life. For an instant, I saw the woman I married full of earnest regret, and I nearly wavered. Then I remembered the hidden chats, the discarded promises, and the moment passed. I slept in the guest room. At dawn, I drove to work and called Ms. Foster's office from the parking lot. She offered an appointment the following afternoon. The rest of the day, I operated on muscle memory, answer email, shuffle papers, nod during meetings. At lunch, I reviewed the photos, then deleted them from my gallery and placed them in a password-protected drive. The meeting with Ms. Foster felt clinical, almost merciful. She explained the filing process, the likely custody arrangement, and the temporary support schedule because Claire was unemployed. I supplied bank statements, mortgage records, and the timeline I had built. Her efficiency fortified my resolve. Before leaving, I signed the initial petition. I drove home with a copy of the documents in an envelope on the passenger seat. Claire's car was gone. I texted her that we needed to talk when the children were at school. She replied with a single word, "Okay." 2 mornings later, after we waved Jane and Martin onto the bus, Claire and I sat at opposite ends of the dining table. I slid the envelope across. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The moment her eyes found the word divorce, she began to sob. She pleaded for a trial separation instead. She said she was willing to attend therapy twice a week, volunteer at church, anything to show the children marriage could survive hard seasons. I reminded her we had already spent months in limbo, and that nothing had changed except she had continued to hide contact with Andrew. She accused me of giving up too easily. I answered that she had surrendered our vows the night she planned a life with another man. The conversation lasted 3 hours, spiraling between bargaining blame and exhausted silence. By the end, she asked if there was any scenario in which I could trust her again. I said I could not imagine one. She put her head in her hands and whispered that she feared living alone. I told her that fear could not be my reason to stay. After she retreated to the bedroom, I sat in the quiet house and felt a strange relief. The hardest sentence had been spoken. The next steps were painful, but clear. That week, we began practical preparations. I booked a session with a counselor who specializes in helping children through divorce. Claire arranged to stay with her sister on alternating weekends while we worked out a schedule. We agreed to delay telling the kids until the counselor guided us on timing, but we both knew we could not wait long. Each evening, we functioned like uneasy colleagues. We swapped updates about school events, soccer practice, dentist appointments. Claire tried small kindnesses, a fresh pot of coffee left for me at 6 a.m., folded laundry on my bureau, but I accepted them the way one accepts condolences from a stranger. I no longer checked her phone or searched the house. I no longer needed proof of anything. The petition was filed with the court 2 weeks later. Claire received formal notice by certified mail. That evening, she knocked on the guest room door. I opened it. She looked small in the hallway light. I signed the acknowledgement, she said. I still hate this. I know, I replied. She whispered that she would never stop loving me. I said love must include honesty. She nodded, once turned, and walked away. A few days later, Ms. Foster called to confirm the first mediation date in early May. Custody, property division, and support would be negotiated there, unless we reached a private agreement sooner. I emailed Claire the proposed parenting plan. The children would live primarily with me during the school week and spend Friday night to Sunday evening with her until she found stable housing. She read it in silence, then surprised me by agreeing without modification. April slipped by in uneasy calm. Claire landed a handful of interviews, but no offers. Money grew tight, yet she never asked me to delay filing. Perhaps the paperwork made her understand that bargaining time had ended. We attended separate therapy appointments, paid bills, and kept the household running in polite silence. One afternoon, Jane's science fair ribbon arrived in the mail. She danced around the kitchen while I congratulated her. Claire smiled, pride brightening her tired face. For a heartbeat, the three of us looked like the family we had been. And then Martin asked if we could all go out for pizza to celebrate. Claire and I exchanged a glance heavy with unspoken truth. I said pizza sounded perfect. We ate at a corner booth, cheered Jane with root beer toasts, and avoided subjects that could crack the fragile moment. Late that night, Claire texted from the other room, saying days like that made her believe we could still heal. I did not reply. Hope to me now belonged to another path. The counseling session on how to tell the children took place the first week of May. The therapist advised honesty without blame, clear explanations about living arrangements, and repeated assurances that parental love never ends. Claire and I practiced the script in the car outside the office. She cried through the rehearsal. I felt strangely composed. We agreed to talk to the kids on Saturday morning. That evening, I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the ceiling fan and rehearsing the words until they felt like lines in a play. Saturday dawned bright. We gathered in the living room. Claire's eyes were red, my hands were cold, and the children sat on the sofa, hugging throw pillows. I told them we both loved them, and always would, but we could not stay married. Claire explained that parents sometimes try their best, but cannot fix certain problems. Jane burst into tears, asking if love was not enough. Martin asked if birthdays would still happen together. We answered every question as gently as we could. When the tears slowed, Jane said she hated change, and Martin crawled into my lap. Claire reached out, and the four of us held one another until the sun tilted across the carpet. That evening, Claire packed a weekend bag and left for her sister's apartment. After she drove away, I watched the taillights fade, feeling grief and relief in equal measure. The house stood quiet, except for the ticking kitchen clock. I made popcorn and let the kids choose a movie. They picked an animated film about rebuilding after disaster. In the dark, Jane leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered that she loved me. I said I loved her too, more than she could measure. The first mediation session was only days away. I knew the hardest legal work was still ahead, but a different kind of peace had begun. The next chapter would involve lawyer meetings, financial disclosures, and learning how to be a single father. Part 4 will detail those negotiations, the final court date, and the first months after the divorce decree, when Claire and I learned to co-parent without reopening every wound. Mediation began on a rainy Thursday in May. Claire and I sat at opposite ends of a polished oak table while our attorneys shuffled papers. The mediator, a patient woman with silver hair and calm eyes, explained the rules, speak respectfully, Address proposals, not personalities. Remember that every decision filters down to the children. We both nodded. I could see Claire's hands tremble slightly whenever financial matters came up, and I realized she feared being unable to afford a stable home once support ended. Part of me wanted to soothe her instinctively, the old reflex of a husband, but I stayed silent. Compassion was still there, but marriage was not. Custody negotiations went more smoothly than I had dared hope. From the start, we agreed the children needed consistency. My schedule allowed me to handle school mornings, homework, and weeknight routines. Claire wanted weekends to build special memories and time to interview for work without rushing. The mediator drafted a plan Monday after school through Friday morning with me, Friday afternoon through Sunday evening with Claire, alternating holidays, shared summer weeks. Jane would keep her art club and Martin his soccer team. Claire and I would both attend recitals, tournaments, and parent-teacher nights sitting on separate sides, if that helped maintain peace. Division of property took longer, mostly because the house held more equity than either of us realized until the appraisal. Claire argued for keeping it, so the kids would not lose their bedrooms. I countered that the mortgage was heavy for a single income, even with temporary support. After 2 sessions, we reached a compromise. I would refinance in my name, buy out her share of the equity with part cash and part retirement rollover, and guarantee her access for family events until she found larger housing. Each concession felt like peeling off another layer of our shared past, equal parts painful and liberating. By early June, the remaining issues were reduced to details: how we would exchange health insurance information, who would claim the children on alternating tax years, how to handle travel notices. Ms. Foster told me this was unusually cooperative given the circumstances. I said we both loved Jane and Martin more than we disliked each other. The remark surprised me as much as anyone. Hate never bloomed because sadness took all the space. Court was scheduled for the second week of July. Claire and I arrived early, sitting in the hallway outside the courtroom. She wore a navy dress that used to be her lucky presentation outfit. I wore the same charcoal suit from our wedding anniversary dinner 2 years earlier. We exchanged polite greetings, no more, no less. When our case was called, the judge reviewed the mediated agreement line by line, confirmed with both of us that we understood it, and signed the decree. The gavel's soft tap sounded ordinary, not like the thunderclap I had imagined. 15 minutes later, we walked out, legally single. Outside the courthouse, Claire asked if I would join her for coffee to discuss telling the kids the decree was final. There were benches under a maple tree nearby, so we sat there instead. We agreed to keep the conversation factual. The judge had approved our plan. Nothing about our love for them had changed. The new schedule would begin right after summer camp. Claire thanked me for protecting her dignity during the process. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Before we stood up, she said she hoped one day we could be friends again. I said friendship takes time, but I wished her well. Telling Jane and Martin that the divorce was official happened that evening at the kitchen table. We showed them a printed calendar with a new routine in bright colors. Jane asked if she could still text me during Mom's weekend. I told her my phone would always be on. Martin asked if birthdays would still be together. I promised yes, as long as everyone was comfortable. They both cried a little, hugged both parents, then asked if we could watch a movie as a family before Mom dropped them at my place for the night. We chose a comedy. Jane laughed, Martin fell asleep against Claire, and for 2 hours, the 4 of us found a fragile peace. July ended with Claire landing an account manager position at a startup. The salary was lower than her previous job, but the atmosphere sounded healthier, and mercifully, Andrew was nowhere near the company directory. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 15 minutes away. The kids helped pick paint colors for their new rooms. I bought them matching desk lamps so homework would feel familiar no matter which home they were in. August brought new patterns. On Monday mornings, Jane and Martin ate cereal at my kitchen island backpacks lined up by the door. Friday after school, we met Claire at a nearby park, exchanged hugs under a shade pavilion, and reset for the next 48 hours. At first, the transitions felt raw. Martin worried he would forget a favorite toy. Jane texted me late one Saturday because she missed the way I tucked her in. I reminded her Mom could make up bedtime stories too, and that love was not measured by the house you slept in. Gradually, the anxiety eased. They began to treat both homes as theirs. Claire and I communicated through a parenting app that time-stamped every message, preventing misinterpretations. In emergencies, we called, but otherwise the app kept us civil and clear. We attended Jane's autumn art show together, standing 5 feet apart, smiling for a photo she asked a friend to take. Martin's soccer championship was on a crisp Saturday. He scored the winning goal, then sprinted across the field and hugged us both without noticing the space between our chairs. Therapy became a weekly ritual for me. In those sessions, I learned to dismantle the self-doubt that had grown during the open marriage debate. The counselor had me write 2 letters. I never sent one to the version of Claire, who broke my heart, another to the version who once held it gently. Putting feelings into sentences emptied them of poison. I began sleeping through the night again. Claire reached out in late October with news that she had met the benchmarks in our support agreement, so payments would step down as outlined. She thanked me for reliability and said she had enrolled in an evening course to sharpen her digital marketing skills. I replied that I was glad things were stabilizing. Our exchange felt adult, respectful, almost cordial. No undertones, no hidden agenda. Winter holidays were the first real test. Thanksgiving morning, the kids helped me make cinnamon rolls. Then that afternoon, we drove to Claire's apartment for dinner. She roasted turkey, I carved it. Jane passed the gravy boat, Martin led a goofy toast. Before we left, Claire handed me a small envelope. Inside was a gift card to a hardware store along with a note thanking me for fixing the leaky faucet in her new place. I nodded, surprised by the gesture, then pulled 2 boxes from my coat ornaments the children had made for her tree. On New Year's Eve, after dropping the kids at Claire's, I sat alone in my townhouse. The living room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heater. Instead of mourning lost plans, I flipped through a notebook of goals, finish repainting the hallway, keep therapy appointments, take the kids camping in the spring, volunteer at the community center once a month. At midnight, fireworks popped in the distance. I was not happy in a fireworks and champagne sense, but I was content deep in my chest, and that felt like progress. By the 1-year mark since Claire's first proposal, day-to-day life had settled. She and I exchanged polite smiles, shared school reports, and cheered from opposite bleachers. Jane was preparing for high school orientation. Martin had graduated from Lego Cities to beginner coding. The counselor said both children displayed resilience, typical of kids who feel loved by both parents. That verdict became my private medal. I have not dated yet. At first, the idea sounded exhausting, then risky, and finally, merely distant. I know I will when the time is right. For now, I am busy learning how to braid Jane's hair, how to debate comic book lore with Martin, how to enjoy my own company. Some evenings, I sit on the back steps drinking tea, watching the sky shift colors, and I feel an emotion that once seemed out of reach, peace. If anyone reading this story stands at the edge of a similar cliff, wondering whether stability exists on the other side, know this pain can shrink. Trust in yourself can return. Children can thrive when shown consistent love. And the end of a marriage, while devastating, can also be the start of a life rebuilt on honesty. I would never have chosen this path, but I walk it with my head up, grateful for 2 healthy kids, a home full of laughter, and a future that finally feels like mine. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.